Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
I'm your co-host, Rich Gear here as well, and we're on chapter 7, right, or 8?
Seven. I believe it's 7 of my book
Yes.
that will be coming out in April. It's called "Don't Let Your Geology Mess Up Your Theology." And what we're going to talk about tonight is a little bit off the beaten path, kind of like, because it's going to be called "Exploring the Field." And that's the name of the chapter, and part of it is to take a little inventory or maybe a bucket list of places that you can explore as a creationist to gather information about geology and find examples where the geology really doesn't match the evolutionary narrative.
Right, now in this chapter you do give the caveat that when you read the information at these places, they're going to give you the evolutionary worldview. But you don't need to be intimidated by this. There's a good creation alternatives to this, and you can read about them even in this book or in other places all over. But these are some really nice places to see. And Doug, we've been to a lot of these places, right?
Right, a lot of these places we've been to. A lot of the places I want to talk about today are either places I haven't been to for a very long time,
right,
or places I want to go to, and they're a little bit remote, and I'd like to be able to maybe, if there's people who are in the area, to actually visit it and
right,
send me information about it, because it's kind of neat, you know. But one of the things I did in this chapter was to actually talk about the mechanics of actually organizing a trip, like we've done our little RAE adventures.
He's pretty good at this, I'll tell you. I don't organize it. Doug does it. Just the truth be known, he does a very good job at this too, and he's done it over these. Well, Doug, you started kind of doing it even on your trip back or out to California when you were in the service.
Right. Yeah.
You learned about a lot of these places. I learned about a lot of these places when I went with it was my dad's World War II friend. And he went out to an 88th convention out in California, and we decided we were going to see national parks, but I did not do it in light of creationary thinking at the time. I was only in high school. It was after you came back from, well, no, actually it was before you went out to the Navy that I became saved, coming to the kingdom,
right,
and become a young Earth creation guy, reading the Genesis flood. It was kind of my baptism by fire, if you will. But Doug, you on the way back really got a good handle when you went to all the different places. I get a kick out of it though, because your wife said, "Well, I don't know, I'm tired of seeing all the rocks." And Doug is endlessly fascinated by geology, which I am as well. But I think she was more interested in Las Vegas. But
well, not so much the city of Las Vegas, but she liked to explore places like Chinatown and
shops and stuff like that,
and things of that sort, and,
which is totally fine. But
so you have. The females have a different perspective on things,
but she was very good. But she was very good about letting you go where you wanted to go, and you saw a lot of these things. But you've gone back in recent years to see other ones, and there's still some things you haven't seen yet that you'd like to see. Well, let's tell us about it.
Well, let's take. We were in South Africa a while back,
right?
And I found out after we went there that there's a spot in Lesotho, which is this little landlocked country inside of South Africa.
Right, yeah.
And it's a mountainous area that is a separate entity.
Yep.
And so you'd probably have to get a Lesotho passport as well as a South African passport to get there.
I'm not so sure that's right. Maybe didn't we go into those? I thought we went into at least one of those things, because there's like 2 or 3 landlocked. They were like tribal. They're like nations.
Lesotho, and then there's Swaziland, which has now got a new name, which I don't remember what it is.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I didn't know that.
In Lesotho, I've read about a place called Qthing, and Qthing has a cave where you can go into it and see dinosaur tracks on the ceiling.
Oh man, I wish we'd have seen that when we were there.
I know. But, and so here you have these indentations in the layer that forms the ceiling of the cave that are actually in relief, going down in that particular layer up above the ceiling of the cave.
They're actually out. They're not incised. They're excised.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that would be fascinating to see. What kind of dinosaurs do you know?
I don't remember that, but
Okay.
That's just kind of an interesting thing. And the question is, well, how did that cave form? When did it form?
Right.
And how did it form during the flood? And that's sort of the puzzles that we try to solve in this book. We take, and we don't claim to have the questions. We weren't there. We weren't able to actually observe it forming. But it's fun to speculate and give ideas of how something like that could form. So obviously, the layers that were in the cave got eroded out and underneath the track-bearing layers, and exposed these. And it's just kind of a real interesting anomaly.
Yeah, we've been to South Africa twice, but boy, I missed that one.
Yeah. You remember Howick Falls?
No, I don't.
Oh, well, Howick Falls, he took us to Peter Maritzburg, a little bit further west of Durban. And, and I don't know if you were with us or not.
I don't think so, because I don't remember that.
Howick Falls actually has a creature that dwells in the basin of the falls that they've observed, sort of like
like a Loch Ness monster?
Loch Ness monster.
Serious? Okay, so but is anybody okay? But has anybody got any photographs of it or any?
Apparently, there have been people who've seen it and continue to see it. And this is kind of an elusive thing, but and I forget what they called it, but it was
is it a plesiosaur type of thing or something?
Something of that sort.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
wow.
And the locals don't want to go down there.
Okay.
For that reason, and so it's kind of an interesting thing. One of the highest waterfalls in the world is in that area.
Really?
And it's over 3,000 feet, and it's called Tugela Falls. And it's where the Drakensberg escarpment is.
Okay.
And that's just outside of Lesotho. But it's apparently was just a little ways from Howick Falls. And so I missed that one, but I guess to get to this waterfall, it's a hike up the escarpment. One of the things that we did I remember it was in Arches National Park and Canyonlands and a few other places, and I think we did this in Glacier National Park. We used walkie-talkies.
Okay.
And
which one was it?
I think
Glacier. I think Glacier National Park we used them.
Yeah.
I don't know that we did them in Arches though. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. We have used them, but yeah.
But that seems to be a good idea, especially where there's no cell service and we have to realize if we're going to explore the field and various national parks, sometimes the communications are poor, and the conditions are dangerous. You have to, and if you're going to hike the Grand Canyon, for example, you have to prepare for that. It's not something that you can just casually do and take a couple water bottles with you and.
I tried to do that. That was a big mistake. I was 20 years old and I hadn't slept for 2 days and hadn't eaten for 3 and thought, let's hike to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And I made it. But on the way back, not quite so much. I was about 100 feet from the top. I could see the rim. Next thing I know, I'm being nursed to health by a nun and her niece because I had passed out. I remember sort of remotely being passed hand to hand over. There was a whole line of people going with the trail, but basically we tried to. That was back in the hippie days when we were young and dumb, and we just did stupid things. But and luckily I was able to live to tell the tale. But I did get to see the bottom of the Colorado River because that's one thing I'd like to do, Doug. Talk about things on our bucket list is that you mentioned the raft trip.
Yeah,
the Grand Canyon.
And they have, the creationists have organized some excellent raft trips with Canyon Ministries.
Right.
And they're not only that, they have rim tours and tours of some of the other national parks in the area, which north of the Grand Canyon, you have Zion National Park, Bryce Canyon,
They're all
Capitol
beautiful.
Reef National Park, and you have Canyonlands and Arches, and these are all examples that I have in my book.
Yeah, so they're in that chapter, right? Or a lot of them?
Well, they're in the book
They're in
as
the book,
separate
yeah.
chapters.
Okay.
And so I talk about those particular parks in detail, but there are some of them that I still want to visit and haven't got a chance.
Which ones?
The one I really would like to go back to it was Crater Lake.
Oh, yeah.
Crater Lake, really has some interesting geology. Of course, it's a recent volcano.
Yeah, and it's in Oregon, right?
It's in Oregon, and so I went there with my wife just as I got out of the Navy, and so this was back in 1976, and so the photographs I have are on slides, and so it's a kind of a problem. The slides was the best thing that you could have back in those days,
yeah.
But now it's kind of old technology to actually transfer it from a slide and have it look good.
Yeah.
And a lot of my slides are now all dusty and
Granulated.
dirty,
Dust, yeah.
But
There's always Photoshop.
yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I'll have to give you my slide scans and see what we can do with
You
it.
probably clean them up, yeah.
But the thing about Crater Lake is that it just reeks of recent volcanism, and you have the island in the site of it called Wizard Island. And there's actually several other cinder cones underneath.
Was that a secondary volcanic action in the middle?
Yes.
Yeah.
And volcanoes are like that. They'll have their initial blast,
Right.
and then they'll have the secondary lava domes that are formed as a result of subsequent eruptions. And so I know the northern part of the whole park is all pumice, and so the pumice just covers everything.
See, when I went out there, I wasn't aware of any of this stuff. I just went out to see
Yeah.
national parks, and I've been to, because I was there back in '68. A long time with a friend of my dad's who went through there. But
The other thing that was really amazing is there's neighboring mountains, and they're also volcanic in nature, but they are such that what's exposed is the central core. There was enough of a blast from the Crater Lake explosion that it blasted away all the soft rock surrounding it. So you have these needle-like mountains, like Mount Thiel.
are they inside the lake or on the outside?
Outside of the lake.
Okay.
So maybe
So it's
10 to 20 miles away, but
Okay.
there was enough force from the explosion of the Crater Lake to denude the whole landscape, so all that's left is the central core of the cinder cone.
Wow.
And so it's kind of interesting to see that. And a lot of the features in the Crater Lake had to do with the volcanic dikes. And they are the extrusions that stick up through the fumaroles, and that hardens the rock around it.
Okay.
And you would be able to see these spiky things, like, and one of them is called Phantom Ship.
And that's inside though, or is
Yes,
that?
and that's inside the lake.
Inside
It's just
the
at the edge, and then there's the Devil's Backbone, which looks like it's a dike, and it's vertical like that, and it goes all the way down the side of the mountain, mountain going into the lake.
So now, how's all this significant for creation people?
What is significant is it shows recent volcanism within biblical timelines. Now the evolutionists will extend it out, the way they always do.
Yeah.
But it's they can't get away from the fact that taking thousands of years of erosion, it would not take that long time to form. It would not expect it to have these features around if it was really ancient.
They would be gone, probably.
They'd be gone, yeah.
Right.
So
don't they? But what they do seems to be a lot of times they recycle things. They'll say, okay, something wears down, then it gets built up, and then it wears down, builds up.
Yeah.
But they take this form, and then they say it's 100 million years old. So that puts the lie to the reform, wear out type stuff. I hear that a lot of.
Yeah.
It's like recycling stuff all the time. They do that with the magnetic field. They do that with a lot of things. It goes down. Oh, the comets. They get formed, they wear away, and then they get reformed. Well, they do that in geology. It seems like they do that as well. I mean, and I don't understand, Doug. You had a thing in that chapter that I remember about if the Mississippi Delta or the Delta, the number of sediment that was coming into there, it would be so huge. It would be. I can't give the figure because I can't.
All right. Well, this is worth reading right directly from.
Why don't you do that? Because it's really good.
So you look at the size of the world's river deltas. The deltas of the world's major rivers do not contain enough sediment for millions of years of erosion.
Right.
And you take the major watersheds of North America. We have the deltas of the Mississippi, the St. Lawrence, the Colorado, Columbia River. They show very little sediment, and
right.
A lot of them are estuaries where they just widen out into the ocean, and there's not any delta at all. But take a look for the Bird's Foot Delta of the Mississippi.
Yeah.
That's really the only exception. And the rate of the sediment flowing in the Mississippi River is an average of 436,000 tons a day.
Wow.
Now, and the low is about 200,000 tons, the high is 1.5 million tons. And so that's an average of about 160 million tons a year. And over a million years, it represents 160 trillion tons. Okay, and a ton of sand represents about 22 cubic feet, and so the volume of sediment in a million years would be 240,000 cubic miles.
And what did
Now, where did all this go?
Where does it all go? Yeah, and how much would that would cover? It seems like that would cover the world. I mean,
well, the entire it's much larger than the entire Earth.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Earth.
So where did it all go?
Well, in 4,000 years, it will be 95 cubic miles of sediment, and that corresponds to biblical predictions. The Nile Delta is 10,000 square miles. The Mississippi Delta is 5,000 square miles. And the largest the delta in the world is the one for the Ganges and the Brahmaputra rivers in India.
Yeah.
And that's 41,000 square miles. But we're talking about 240,000 cubic miles.
This is the thing that always gets me, Doug. I said, when you get stuff like this, you say, what is your explanation for that, Doug? What
I don't think this has ever been actually looked at.
Really? That's shocking almost,
And so I was just doing the back of the envelope kind of math with this, and I said, why is it that we don't have the amount of sediment laid down by...
Right.
And so it's... I don't think there's a good evolutionary explanation for this.
Right.
But you have all these layers of sediment that was laid down over the course of Noah's flood, and they misinterpret that as being one sanded grain at a time
uniformitarian stuff,
over millions of years, and yet these sediments are piled onto one layer after another without any bioturbation between them.
Oh, yeah. And what is bioturbation?
It's where you have biological processes carving it up and making it...
like grass, trees, bugs, things there should be biological disturbances, which these are laid right on top of each other with nothing inside.
Right,
Yet
yeah.
they're laid down. Supposedly, each one of them are, represents. Well, it depends on the layer, I suppose, but thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions of years of time they're talking about, and there's none of that short-term stuff that would have grown up during the middle of that. Yeah.
And so Larry Perry and I took a trip to Joggins, Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia, yeah.
And this is a spot where the sedimentary layers are laid down in a sort of a tilted fashion, 18,000 feet of sediments. And so that's pretty significant, but it's like a stack of pancakes that got tipped over. And but at the top of it, it's all sheared off flat.
Wow, okay.
And so Joggins is, to get there, you have to make quite a trip of it. You have to, we flew into Boston, rented a car, drove up into Maine,
Right.
then to New Brunswick, and then over to Nova Scotia. And there's a little isthmus where the Bay of Fundy ends up like a little point, but it before it, I think it's the Northumberland Strait that goes between Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And there's a bridge that takes you over to Prince Edward Island.
I've been over there. I haven't been to Joggins State Park, but I've been over there to that area. Yeah.
Well, it's not a state park.
And I know what is it?
It's a UNESCO heritage
World Heritage Site.
right?
Okay. All right.
So, and it's where the Lyell of all people went over there, and he classified this as Carboniferous strata.
Yeah.
But he failed to mention the fact that the trees that you find in that
That's what I wanted to get to.
are going up through quite a number of layers of the rock.
Polystrate fossils.
Right.
And this is the same or very similar that happens over in Specimen Ridge, right? That's in Wyoming, correct?
Right, yeah.
I've never seen that. That's one I'd like to see on my bucket list. Have you been there, Doug?
No.
Yeah, I like to.
I've been to the Yellowstone, but I failed to actually go see that. Now, it's really funny that one of the anti-creationists stumbled over that very thing.
Yeah, numbers.
Yeah, around numbers. He wrote about all the different creationists and how wrong they were, and
Because supposedly he started out as a creationist, as I understand it, but that tripped him up, and he rejected all of it. But that's one of the strongest arguments, I think, was what's happened with the Mount St. Helens stuff, and we don't want to get off into the weeds about that, but it's shown that what you see in these fossils is what happens when you have a huge amount of water over a short period of time, shearing off trees based on volcanism, right? Mount St. Helens, water coming in, and what happens to trees? They tip upright. The roots generally are sheared off, or you got a little bit on the bottom, but there's not.
like in Joggins, they're sometimes upside down.
And they're upside down, but they tend to tip upright instead of lay flat after a period of time. Maybe it's the way the water collects in the bottom, but and then the sediment, they get in there. I wonder, do they have trees that are now buried like that over there in Mount St. Helens? I've never thought to ask that.
Well, you find them in the Spirit Lake.
That's what I'm saying. The Spirit Lake.
In Spirit Lake, they find that they land upright.
Right. And then the sediment
comes in over the top of it, and so that's a feature of Mount St. Helens. By the way, there is a creation museum there at Mount St. Helens.
Is there really?
There are actually, I think the last count I had was that there were like 36 creation museums in North America.
36, huh?
And so there's places like the Akron Fossil and Science Center,
Right.
One in Dayton, one, of course, the Creation Museum in Ark Encounter, and then now we have one in Dixon, Tennessee, and we have the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, the new ICR Museum in Dallas, and so there's all sorts of different places that you can go to a museum, and they have a creationist expression. You have the Museum of the Bible, lots of places like that one in Alberta, the Big Valley Creation Science Center.
Okay, that's Canada. Yeah,
That's Canada, and so we do have a lot of resources where we can go and see things and get a biblical perspective on things.
So Doug, we got about a couple minutes left. We got 3 minutes left or so. What are your you have like 10 things you want to see that you haven't seen, or what's your bucket list composed of?
I've mentioned a few of them, but
You have.
I think one of the places I want to visit is the Canadian Rockies. Now, we did visit a piece of that in Waterton Glacier National Park.
Yep.
But if you go up a little bit further in the Crow's Nest Pass, that's where you can actually see the layers that are out of order. Now, that's one of the things you look for in geology is does the geology actually match what is predicted by evolution?
Right.
And if you have older strata that's on top of younger strata, well, you have to explain that as an anomaly to what you expect, because the law of superposition is that the younger rocks are not on top of the older
Right,
rocks.
every time. Yeah, and it's rarely that way. It seems, well, I mean, they'll have certain layers that'll follow a sequence, and then there'll be a big gap, or there'll be something that's way supposed to be older on top of the younger. All kinds of stuff. Like we've noted this before, earlier chapters of this book, but there's really no place in the world, there might be in any kind of large area, where you see the actual geologic scale. It doesn't really exist.
Full exists.
It doesn't exist.
Full scale doesn't exist. There's like a place in North Dakota where they claim it does, but that's sort of questionable. And so it's sort of a interesting study to take the assumptions of evolution and test them and see if they actually work out. And so a lot of times you don't find the fossils in the sequence that you expect them to be. It's something that you have. You have to piece it from here or over here or in that place, and depending on the layer it is, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that they predict the age of these layers based upon the fossils that are in them.
Right, right.
And so, it's I hope you enjoy this book. I hope you order it when it comes out in April of 2024. And I think that this may help some people get through some of this thing. The assumptions that, the earth is millions of years, so that disproves the Bible. And so I hope you enjoyed our show.
Yep.
We'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.